Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to something completely different on the channel. Now, last week I was lucky enough to be invited to be one of the first people to get a look at some F1 Manager 2022 gameplay, and I am super excited to share some screenshots with you, talk about some of the information we were given, and go over some of the things that have got me super hyped for this game. Now, this won't be an exhaustive list of what we learned last week because there was just so much information, and quite frankly, I'd be here all day if I tried to cover it all. But I will give you a quick overview of what F1 Manager 2022 is all about, and then run through a few of the details in the gameplay screenshots, tell you about the awesome in-race stuff, and cover some more features we got to see that I think are really cool. And of course, thank you so much to everyone on the F1 Manager team over at Frontier and everyone involved with the PR and the community managers for giving me this awesome opportunity. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. First of all then, what is F1 Manager 2022? Well, it does exactly what it says on the tin, but in case you missed the announcement, F1 Manager 2022 is a fully F1 licensed single-player game developed by Frontier, where you can channel your inner Gunther Steiner if you wish, as you take on the role of team principal at one of the 10 teams on the F1 grid and try to take them on to title glory. You have got control over drivers, staff, the design and developments of parts, investing in upgrading facilities, reacting to and voting on regulation changes, all whilst trying to keep your team within that cost cap. Basically, everything you'd expect from a management title, but with some proper in-depth features. And as I'll get into later in this video, honestly, some pretty impressive in-race stuff as well. And just quickly, the title is coming to Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, PS4 and PS5, as well as Steam and Epic Games Store later this summer, although we don't yet have a firm release date. Honestly, this game looks so good, and that's just based on an initial look at the gameplay as it stands right now, which gets me so excited about where this game could be by the time we get to launch and where it could go in the future. At the event last week, which, by the way, was the first time I've ever been invited to attend anything like this, we will walk through some gameplay around the management side of things and the stuff we can do, and watching race by game director Andy Fletcher and executive producer Adam Woods. So let's have a closer look at some of the details in these screenshots then, starting with a look at the home screen. And of course, this is all still a work in progress, and the content and the stuff we were shown was all from an early internal build of the game, and so therefore does not reflect the final game. But I think this is all very much what you'd expect to see from a home screen like you see in other management titles. All the information you need is there. So you've got your team season and long-term objectives here at the top left, as well as board confidence. You've got to keep them guys happy, of course. Underneath, we've got the championship standings there. Got to say, Alpine having a cracking start to the season in this example. Not such a great start for McLaren, though. Down the middle, you've got your driver info there. That's all pretty self-explanatory. And just underneath that, you've got the next race and how long until that event starts. On the right-hand side is your upcoming events. So this can include things like when the manufacturing of parts is set to be completed, upgrades when the next race is, but also things like your facility upgrade completion and driver scouting reports, that kind of thing. Then at the very bottom of the screen, there are the tabs, as well as how much money you've got available to spend. I reckon my first playthrough, that's going to drop to 0 pretty quickly. And I've got some screenshots to show you for what's behind some of these tabs, by the way, and I'll get to those in just a second. But you can see there, you've got your inbox, no prizes for guessing what's going to be in there. And then you've got your calendar, circuits, race, cars, drivers, staff, facilities, board, finances, and the standings. We'll start by having a look at what's behind the circuits tab, and here you've got a look at the calendar, some race stats as well. And if you're a regular of the channel, you'll know just how much I love a good stat, plus the tyre nomination and allocation for the weekend too. On the right-hand side of the screen, you've got a brief overview of the weather forecast, as well as some information on how abrasive and grippy the track is, but also really pleased to see a safety car chance percentage there, so you can really spend some time trying to factor that into your strategy for the weekend. And if you click on one of those tracks listed on the left-hand side, it will take you to a much more detailed screen where you can get even more info, like the track map you can see there. You can also take a look at car performance and parts attributes, expected strategies, and there's even some historical info there on things like past results. And I will say as well, I love how clean these menus all look already, and it seems as though they're going to be pretty easy to navigate. Onto the staff menu, and this is something that's good to see. Real world engineers. I guess maybe not a massive surprise as this is a fully licensed game, but still, that just all helps to add to the immersion of the whole thing, and I love that. That is so important. Not a huge amount to go off, but we can at least see how our staff will be categorized. So underneath the, let's call them big four positions, are your engineering team, scouting team, and of course your pit crew. Look at that engineering room as well. That looks very slick and some really nice details in there, like the timing screens, the data and telemetry in the middle. And then you've got some onboard shots as well and the driver tracker there too. That's all really nice stuff. And again, it helps with the immersion. You will have a lot of control when it comes to staff, and you can really sort of work on making the team your own. So as well as being able to scout drivers, more on that a bit later, you're also going to be able to scout and, who knows, eventually even perhaps choose to poach staff from other teams to help give you the edge. How many people are going to go straight for Adrian Newey? I mean, probably me. And the last menu shot I've got is of the finances screen, where you are going to have to try and find the right balance between making sure everything is running smoothly within your team, keeping the board happy by staying within budget and hitting goals, whilst also trying to pick out the areas to invest in to improve things like, for example, performance and facilities. It is going to be a really tough balancing act. And as you can see, we've got even more sub-menus in there for season balance, monthly balance, cost cap, and sponsorship. And on sponsorships, you will get the chance pre-race to view the targets for the week set up by sponsors, and you'll also be able to suggest some performance guarantees, which if you hit them will help to boost your income a little bit more. But the sponsor targets themselves are things like qualifying a certain position or a window of positions, like qualifying inside the top 10 as an example. And obviously the better you do with hitting those goals, the more cash you're going to bring in. And again, there, some nice details behind all of that with a, I want to say, boardroom, would you call it that? Either way, it's smarter than my office, but it's all looking very slick and clean this game so far. And the final screenshot of the in-game stuff I've got for you is the race strategy editor menu. Although you will have the option to select a pre-made or recommended strategy, you can also create your own from scratch, as you can in the F1 racing games, of course. But as you'd expect from a management game, this one feels a little bit more in-depth. This shot looks like it was taken from a race weekend. I mean, the garage in the background gives that away, Sean, you genius. Anyway, as I say, you can make your own strategy and based on how hard you want your drivers to be pushing, something which can be controlled by adjusting the current pace target option. Your pit window, highlighted in that teal sort of colour, will obviously change. And you can also see there how the weather is forecasted to change as the race progresses. And you've got some additional information on the right-hand side, including things like pit window, how long the race is estimated to be, and how far your driver is predicted to be inside of that time based on the current strategy. And you've got some information there as well on the life left in the tyres. And based on what we saw last week, a smaller version of that strategy screen will dynamically update through the race to show if your drivers are on target to hit their pre-race strategy based on how hard they are pushing. The harder they push, of course, the earlier they will need to stop, take it easy, and they could extend. Just the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a real-life race weekend. Those are all the screenshots I've got for you today, but there is so much more to tell you about this game. The in-depth management stuff was great, and there were some really nice surprises in there. But the thing that took me back was how we will be viewing the races in F1 Manager 2022. Now, if you've played games like Motorsport Manager or, like me, are still playing Grand Prix Manager 2 with mods, yes, I'm fully aware it's 2022, then you'll already know that when you get to the track, you're basically watching a top-down view of the action, although I know there are some great mods out there for Motorsport Manager, for example, that give a different view. However, in F1 Manager 2022, you will be able to watch the races in a TV-style presentation with television camera angles, timing towers, replays, and yes, you can even ride on board with drivers. Honestly, I was so surprised by this, and it looks incredible already. You can watch the race in full. We got an example of Australia, so you could sit and watch 58 laps if you wanted to. But if you do choose to speed up time, you will be taken to a 3D map of the track and watch the race unfold from there in what I would call a more modern and updated version of how you perhaps usually expect to watch them. But even that looks fantastic. And the team has described the whole in-race package, by the way, as a hyper-realistic simulation of an official F1 race. And I've got to agree, again, that's on an early build, so it's going to be even better come launch. I took down a few bullet points of the stuff that I wanted to go over from the race, so I'll share those with you now, just some of the features that also caught my eye. So you've got the TV-style race presentation that I've just mentioned, and then you've got that supported by commentary both pre- and post-race from David Croft and Karun Chandok. I believe there is even some in-race commentary over major events as well. I certainly heard some, and it's definitely a bit more in-depth than how Murray Walker just used to shout, "It's Irvine," over an incident in the old F1 racing games, followed by Martin Brundle turning around and just going, "You're right there, Murray." Oh, how times have changed. Anyway, you can also check out incidents that happened during a race, like, for example, a driver retiring you'll get a notification on screen. Click on that and it'll take you to that incident. There'll be trackside and onboard cameras, as I've already mentioned, and throughout the race, alerts will pop up that pause the race and ask you to take some action, a feature described as dynamic events. And if you've ever played other Frontier games like Planet Coaster or Jurassic World Evolution, for example, you'll know how they love to put you on the spot to make a decision that will have in-game consequences. There'll be loads of other information available as well, including tyre history reports and more for the whole grid. You'll have sector tyre information, live brakes and tyre temperature feedback. You can also intervene in the race with driver commands, anywhere from attack to conserve, for example. And that applies to how they run the race energy-wise as well, with orders ranging from overtake to defend and deploy to harvest, among others. And yes, you will be able to issue team orders to your drivers as well. So if you really fancy recreating Austria 2002, you go for it. And the devs also explained to us how when it came to recreating the tracks in-game, they used satellite images and technology to make them as authentic as possible, which for the 100th time in this video already is just going to keep adding to that immersion. And on the subject of immersion, during the race, the team will feature the voices of actual real-world engineers and drivers. For example, we could hear Charles Leclerc's real-world engineer give him some information over the radio, and that was followed by Leclerc saying "okay" in response. The radio is taken from previous seasons, but my word, did that just add a little bit something to the presentation and drew me into the experience even more. It may not be a huge headline-grabbing feature, but little things like that really do make a difference. Before I summarise and wrap things up, there are a couple of other features we got to take a look at and were told about and that I really want to share with you guys. So first of all, for those of you who can't wait to start developing their cars, you are going to have a fair bit of control over which way you want to go. You will, of course, be able to design parts before you send them to be manufactured, ready for your next big upgrade package. But what I really liked about this feature is that you will be able to take a look ahead to a race a little bit further on in the season, and it will give you some information on what your car may need if you want to be competitive that weekend, and that will allow you to develop parts ahead of time to potentially gain an advantage, get a little bit of a head start over your rivals. You will also be able to research parts for future seasons, but that option will remain locked until all teams have voted on any regulation changes and they're signed off. You'll also be able to see how things like your chassis and your power unit compares with other teams, going back to what I was saying now about looking ahead to future races. So we were shown an example of how Ferrari ranked versus Red Bull in the game, and that was like who was on top in areas such as top speed, cornering, and even dirty air cornering. And that will give you an idea of where you need to be focusing if you want to close that gap on your rivals. We got a little bit of a look at facilities as well in the session. We were shown 3 areas, so car development, staff and operations facilities. And under car development, I've made a couple of notes that say the facility summary said we had 15 out of 16 things built with a total upkeep cost of just over $2.4 million a month, and that the wind tunnel was being refurbished and the car part test centre was undergoing an upgrade. And the reason I'm mentioning these, they might seem a bit random, but there's a reason, which is rare for my content anyway. It looks as though we're going to have multiple options when it comes to making changes to facilities like refurbishment, for example, and not just, as we've seen in other games, build this and that's it. And as I said earlier about the dynamic events, that's very much in line with other Frontier titles, so I'm so pleased to see that implemented into F1 Manager. And the last thing I want to go over today, like I said, there's so much, but this is the last thing I'm going to go over today, and that's driver scouting, and I am very much looking forward to this aspect of the game. So we will have access to all the F1 drivers, all the F2 drivers, and all the F3 drivers. That alone adds to the realism, but also, similar to the official regulations, F3 drivers can only be signed up to an F1 team provided they have either been promoted to F2 or have completed at least 2 seasons in F3 and are, of course, at least 18 years old. As if that wasn't enough, there is no limit to how many seasons you can complete. So over time, as drivers retire, generic drivers will be added to the game. So, you know, kind of FIFA style, random name and stats, that kind of thing. You'll be able to scout drivers and, as previously mentioned, staff, and then you'll get a report in your inbox to consider. Now, we only got to see a little snippet of that at the session, and the examples they had were Jehan Deruvala and Ralph Boschong, with the scout sending info on things like how long is left on the driver's current contract, their salary and potential buyout fee, and what is listed as a notable stat, which for Boschong was cornering. To summarize then, and you've probably already worked this one out, I am so excited for this game. I have been playing Grand Prix Manager 2 since 1996, and although we've had games like the EA versions and Motorsport Manager, I never really got into them, so I have been waiting more than 2 decades for a fully licensed, in-depth F1 Manager game. And F1 Manager 2022, from what we've seen and been told so far, looks like the game I've been waiting that long for. And I honestly do think any of you who are into your management style games are absolutely going to love this. There were some other screenshots shared over on Twitter, which you'll also have seen in this video at times, and I did notice a few people saying things along the lines of, you know, we don't really care about graphics, that's not what we look for in management games, and I totally get where they're coming from. However, if that's the effort they're putting into graphics, just imagine how much effort has gone into the gameplay. And are we really going to be disappointed with a game that's great to play and looks fantastic? I know I won't be. Plus, again, if you've played other Frontier titles like Planet Coaster, Planet Zoo, and or Jurassic World Evolution, you'll know they are very good at producing in-depth and immersive video games that also have great graphics. So if anybody can get this right, Frontier can. For the millionth time in this video, I cannot wait for this game, and yes, I am going to play it to death. That is it for this one then, but you can let me know your thoughts on what we've seen so far in the comment section down below. Also, what features would you like to see in the game when it's released? And if you've got any questions about what we've seen so far, then please do let me know. Now, I will be back on Thursday with the preview for Imola, but in the meantime, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like, as it really does help the channel out, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.